Hello, everybody. This is Tracy Claus with Chasing Butterflies, and these episodes are called This Club Sucks. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Marie Sharp.
Hi.
We have been friends for a few years now. We met through Special Spaces and through other friends, and she is going to share her story. And why don't you tell us about your family?
So, I was married for 38 and a half years before my husband passed away, and I have 3 kids, Megan, Tyler, and Bryce, 3 grandkids, Jackson, Gracie, and Easton.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you want to tell us, you raised your kids in the Clear Lakes area, just like I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically in the Clear Lake area, and it was fun. I mean, we had a great time. It's a great community to raise your kids in.
Absolutely. So you want to tell us a little bit about your grief experience in life?
So, I guess where I will start with that, in just my first experience with grief, it started when I was young with my great grandmother who lived with us. And so it affected me a little deeper because she was so close in the
She's
home.
part of the family.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
I
close
get
in
it.
front of the, in the family. And it was hard, and I remember feeling, sadness. And then when my grandparents both passed away at different times, I was super close with them because I was one of 3 of their only 3 grandchildren. And so that part, was hard. It was really hard losing them because it sort of felt like almost a parent. And so that, it was tough.
I can imagine, yeah.
It was tough. And then in 2013, I lost my son, Tyler. He was 21. And
Can you tell me a little bit about that experience? How it happened or what have you?
yeah, so actually it was pretty tragic. Him and his brother, Tyler was my middle son and my middle child, and my boys were best friends, and they got into a fight one night, and my younger son stabbed my older son, and they both were doing things, but it ended up where Tyler ended up in the hospital and having to have surgery, and technically he should not have died from that wound, but he did. They went in to put there was some internal bleeding over his shoulder, and they went in to put a stent in, and when they did in that artery, and when they did, the other artery blew, and they were not sure. They don't know why that happened, but in the end, he passed away. And so it was difficult living and going through the motions, of all of that, because you're basically numb. And so you're dealing with the grief of one of your sons, and then you're trying to save your other son. And it was just a very, very, very dark road. I wouldn't wish that on any family at all, ever. It was hard. It was very hard getting through those days.
And I'll just tell you this, being one of 7 children and there's 4 boys, that happened all the time. Those fights, and I mean, not all the time, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not uncommon, especially
Yeah.
with brothers. I guess it's all that testosterone, but I remember when it happened just thinking, this sounds like my brothers, nothing intentional at all.
Yeah.
They were just, and unfortunately.
An action and an act in just the heat of the moment is just exactly what that was.
Yeah.
And, Tyler, my husband was there, and he was able to talk to Tyler some before he got into the ambulance, and he said, "Dad, this was not all Bryce. This was not just Bryce's fault here." And
I'm kind of grateful that those words were
me too.
said.
Yeah,
you know?
me too. Because, my husband and I, along with our family, has forgiven Bryce.
Absolutely.
And we absolutely know that was not,
Yeah.
it is what happened, but it's not what he wanted
He
to
was
happen.
not a malicious person,
No.
period.
No, he wasn't. But at the end of the day, we're now still dealing and living without our son
Yeah.
because of those actions.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It was hard to just get to the other side because we were immediately now having to deal with all what we had on our plate moving forward with Bryce. So you're trying to deal with the grief of your son and then the legalities of the other son, which
Yeah.
stretched out over a year.
Yeah.
And so it was very difficult. It was very
I
hard.
can only imagine, especially when you're trying to raise one up, like, we've forgiven you and convince them of that.
Yeah.
Because I'm just imagining myself. I don't know if I would really believe you. I'm just talking about me.
Yeah. Oh, I
know
think he probably
my-
felt that way too.
Yeah, yeah,
somewhat.
because
yeah.
But y'all definitely shown him the love. He
Yes.
knows. He's got to know how
Yes.
much you love him, and you want him here.
Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, it's a hard,
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And it's a heartache and a heartbreak that your heart, it doesn't get any lower than that. I mean, it's a pain that it takes you, to the core,
Absolutely.
it shakes your world to the core.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. So, in this grief y'all were going through, y'all had taken a trip, you and Tommy, for your 30th wedding anniversary. You want to tell me a little bit about
yeah,
came
so,
from there? And
yeah. So we went, it was our 30th wedding anniversary, and we went to Bora Bora.
Beautiful.
And so the 2nd of April, I believe it was, is when everything was final with Bryce. Like we had gotten to the other side of that, and that was sort of now
the legality.
the legality part of that was, we had closure there. And it was our 30th wedding anniversary, and we decided we were going to go do a bucket list, and we went to Bora Bora. And on that trip, well, let me just step back a second. A week before, we had went to the river, Garner State Park, with our family on a family trip, and we were there a week. And when Tommy went off this water slide into this deep hole, and when he came up, and he was an athlete, he was in great shape. He played college football. He could swim.
Yeah.
And he couldn't hardly get to the side. My sister saw him struggling and went out and grabbed him and brought him over to the side. And he was saying he was having trouble breathing. Like it felt like when he was in that water, he felt like
the pressure maybe
the
of the
pressure
water.
of the water made him uncomfortable. And so anyway, we just, okay, that was one of those things you're just, you ponder it for a second, but okay.
Yeah.
So then we were home a day when we got back from that trip, and then we we went to Bora Bora. And so before I even start talking about that part of him, I want to talk about the healing basically that took part in that trip. So we get there, and we both just realize, there was just so much peace when we got there, and I think we were away from everybody, away from our life here. It was absolutely beautiful. God was so present, and we just both felt so much healing taking place in our hearts, and felt like we could just breathe and start to, in a weird way, properly grieve, because we were grieving then, and it was a grief, but we were literally we were going from the funeral home to the attorney's office. And so, it was every day. We were always having to deal with something, and it was just excruciating, actually, And but anyway, so on that trip, just so much healing was taking place, and it was just us, and we were together, and it was just, I don't know, there was just some freedom in a way in that trip. It was beautiful. And then, like midway through the trip, when we were out swimming, and Tommy would get into water over his chest, he felt like he couldn't breathe, and I could tell in the way he was telling me that he was concerned, like it was scaring him. And, I'm not paying as close of attention to it. Like, look, we're swimming with sharks, and you need to come over. We're down, we're swimming with these lemon sharks. And I said, you've got to see this. And he's like, Maria, I can't. I can't breathe. I'm like, just hold your breath for a minute. And, like I'm trying to get him. Yes.
Be a part of this.
Like, we're not coming back here again. And so you've got to do this. And so, and so I said, just hold on to the ladder. And so then that's kind of what he did. But at that point, when he didn't do that, it was registering to me like there's something wrong with him, but what is it? And so I thought it was maybe his heart, like he was having some heart problems. And anyway, we got through that trip, which was absolutely wonderful, and I am so thankful for those memories.
I bet.
But when we got home, we immediately started going to doctors. We started with heart doctor, that cleared, and we went to the pulmonary doctor, that cleared, and then now we're into December, and at a neurologist's office, and at this point, ALS is slightly on the radar because none of these other things, everything was, I don't know, we were just starting to think. And I remember saying, when I went to the neurologist, I remember just saying, we just want to make sure that this is not ALS. And she goes, oh, it's not ALS. No. But we want to do some blood work, and, I think, she said a couple of diagnoses that she thought it was. And anyway, the next day, he went and did some blood work, and the next day she called back and just said, I don't want this to alarm you, but we want you to see a neuromuscular specialist. And so we decided, okay, we're going to go there. And I said, why are you saying that? Why, I was started to question her.
I can't imagine you questioning somebody.
And she just said, I'm not a specialist, and I think I want you to see a specialist. So, okay. So we get there, and I remember it's December 20th, and we're in that office, and he's looking at Tommy, and we had done an EEG. Is that right? Is that where they test the muscles? An EEG. I think that's, or I know, how am I doing? I can't remember.
Well, we're not doctors.
Whatever, I know, I can't remember
There was a test.
whatever the test is that they test your muscles. And so they sent those results over, but in backing up when they were doing that test, I remember hearing the guy saying to the doctor, do you see that? Are you seeing this? So I was kind of going, hey, we're right here, so, but, just pondering again. And so we get over to the neuromuscular specialist, and he looks at him and he just says, look, basically what I think you have is a motor neurons disease. And so we are like, we don't even know what that is. And so we've never heard that terminology. And so he said, but I don't want you to look anything up, and I don't want you to just go home and have Christmas and be with your family and do whatever it is you had plans to do. And then, we'll meet back and after the first of the year, and I want to repeat that test again myself.
Did you look anything up?
And we get right out the door, and we are Googling
We're so bad.
motor neurons disease.
Yeah.
And Tommy was like, oh my gosh. He said, oh my gosh. He said, there's like 5 different ones, but the most common one is, none of them are good, and the most common one is ALS. And I remember I couldn't hardly breathe. I was like, no, not this disease. No.
Yeah.
Not this. On top of that, on top of
we've got a lot.
grief upon grief. No.
Yeah.
And so,
Double stacking here.
yeah, I could barely move. He could barely, like, we were just, it was just disbelief. Like, we were in just denial. There's just no way this is happening to us. And so, I said, well, we're not leaving. We're going back up. So we went back up, and we, just told the doc. I told them, I said, you got to put us back into a room. I have some questions. We need to talk to the doctor. And so he comes in, and I said, I'm very sorry, but we did look it up, and I need for you to be honest. Is this what he has? And he said, I can't be 100% sure. I would like to redo the test myself. There are lots of things that looks like it could be that, but there are also some things that mimic it. So, so anyway, we ended up leaving. We canceled. We were tanked, so we were supposed to go to the Orange Bowl to watch TCU play, or I think it was the Peach Bowl, and we ended up canceling everything. We just couldn't hardly breathe. I mean, we couldn't hardly move. So we tried to get through Christmas without telling our family, so that we could just have a Christmas. We could just we just didn't want to tank everybody with that, and so we just thought we would just be tanked ourselves, which didn't work very well, because you have believe it or not, it's a death sentence. I mean, because there's no cure for that disease,
right? And
it's 2 to 5 years on anything that you read, and so we were like, you're getting that news, not knowing, like, you're a ticking time bomb. It was crazy. And so, literally, we sat on our couch for 30 days and just in so much despair and grief, and not even being able to believe. And I remember my husband, he would always like for him to he always would rub my hands and rub my feet and stuff like that. He just did that. And
sweet. It's okay.
He grabbed my hand and he would rub my fingers, because he said he didn't know how long he was going to be able to do that.
Oh my God.
It was so hard.
That's why we love.
And he did it every day until he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yes, because he knew what he was going to lose. Like he knew. He knew what was coming. And I mean, we had done enough. We just knew enough about it to know.
Right.
And so with that, grief is an everyday, almost a weekly experience, because you're constantly, that disease takes everything, and
your humility.
It does.
Everything.
It takes everything. And so, you're grieving something all the time, because you're losing the ability to do everything, to talk, to speak, to walk, to lift your arm, to write, to type, but he was amazing. Like, he ended up, with an eye gaze computer, and he just learned to do it, and he learned to have he kept his purpose. He made his life his purpose, not the disease his purpose. And he was just incredible. His whole mindset was good. He was so strong in his faith, and he just always kept a positive
Well, the Christmas
outlook.
letters were something I looked forward to every year. And I was like, how is he doing this? I don't know what I don't know how I don't know. He was an amazing person.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't even know him as well as most of your friends.
Yeah.
But every time I was around him, it was, I mean, can I tell a story?
Yeah. Yes.
So my husband and Richie and I go over there to visit, and I guess I was bringing y'all food, and he goes, with his eye gaze, he's like, did Marie tell you she tried to kill me last night? I was like, what? And I'm like looking at her, and she goes, no, I didn't. He had a little episode with his trach.
Yeah, I think I've saved his life, I think, 5 times. One of them, I actually did it by not connecting something right off the beginning, and literally It could have been a fatal mistake. We ended up getting it together just in the nick of time, and he was turning purple.
Thank God.
Yeah, and it was not funny at the time at all. But because he lived to tell about it, it was.
It
funny.
became funny.
It became funny.
Well, that day I was like going, should I be worried? Is he safe with her?
I know. It's so much learning. Like literally, they
Became his nurse.
Yeah, I mean, you have like a 2.5 hour tutorial on on his life-saving device.
Yeah.
And they send you home, okay, and then you're trying to, and then we get home at 10 o'clock at night, and the supplies are everywhere, and you're like,
Oh, yeah.
oh no, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown.
So, I know that y'all talked a lot, and I'm backing up a little bit. Like, how was like when y'all lost Tyler? Like, was he good at communicating with you about his feelings and all that stuff? Because I know sometimes it's hard for guys, and I know he was a very good communicator. But
He was how I survived.
yeah, I bet that man upstairs, God and Richie,
Yeah.
and my kids. I was like, I wouldn't have done it without him.
His strength and
His faith.
His strength,
Wow.
and it's just how I got to the other side of it. With our faith and with him. Like, had I not had him, and just his wisdom and his guidance through all of it, I know where it came from. It came himself, but it also came from God, and he carried that
believe it.
along through all of our family, and we all felt it, and so we were able to journey through at his lead because he completely understood his sons. He knew, and I did too. It wasn't like it was just, I just don't know. I had never hurt like that. Mm-hmm. I'd never had heartache that deep. And so,
when something comes from our body, that they were definitely a part of us.
Yeah.
And it's like that for a guy too, because they did help. But it's the weirdest. They are never not a part of you, even
No.
though they might be married or whatever. They're just an extension of us.
yeah.
And when one of those extensions are gone, it's like, my story's a little bit different. Mine was instant with Chase. Yours was Tyler too, kind of.
Yes.
Y'all had a few hours, and
Yeah.
but they're just part of it. That's what I was trying to get at. It's
Yeah,
like,
they are. It is. And it's not really something that you ever totally get over. With grief, an acceptance happens. And it takes a while for you to realize that they're not coming home, And that part is hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. And Tommy and I did grieve slightly different, like at different times. Maybe we grieved the same way, but it was like he would be okay one minute and I wouldn't, and then it would change, But our support for one another was what was amazing. We held up for each other, and it wasn't perfect. Nothing is, but he was a very strong individual. And
then he gets faced with his disease.
He gets his face, exactly. And it was hard to believe that, it's funny because I say, God, seriously? Like, these two things? Are you kidding me? Like, I'm saying that? And I think there was parts of Tommy that were saying that too.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the guy that would say, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
In fact, he said, why not me? And I think lots of people's lives were altered, changed, moved by him in his actions and the way he chose to live his life.
I believe.
And-
I'm
yeah.
the believer.
Yeah.
I was always amazed. I was like, just watching y'all actually just walk through this journey together,
Yeah.
even him being sick, I was like, y'all were just amazing. And then when y'all moved out to the farm, I was like, he's setting her up for a life that she's going to be able to,
Yeah.
you know, live on her, you know, because
Yeah.
he knew
Yeah.
what was happening.
Right.
And I think it's a beautiful place.
Thank
and
you.
it's so peaceful.
And I'm so glad that he got to be a part of it, like a huge part
Was that
of it.
always y'all's plan?
Not all. I mean, like we kind of always talked about it, about doing it. But you know, kids and sports and life,
yeah.
and then grandkids, and then all that just sort of gets back burner. But I think you know, Tommy, he was sort of in the Prepperville
Yeah.
mindset.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's not. I was too, but he was like, look, you know, we're getting this done. There's no guarantees. I want self-sufficient property. I want to be able to live off the land if we have to. I want to be able to raise our own animals, and we've done all of it. Like they're.
And you're not
pretty much
paying $8 for a dozen of
No,
eggs.
we're not. We are not.
I'm jealous.
Oh my God! I know. I should have totally brought you some, and I intended
That
to.
would be awesome.
Okay. I
Well,
will
Taryn
then.
wants to come visit.
Okay, so good. I'll give it
yeah,
to you then.
we'll do it when we have.
Well, we have
a lot of
100
time.
chickens, so there's always eggs.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that he loved it so much out there,
Yeah.
and that he got, you know, I guess we were there a year and a half before he passed. So, you know, he was able to see it all, you know,
Come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
awesome.
And so lots of it was already there. You know what I mean? We added some things, but, you know, what he put in place was really positive, and
And it was him.
it was him.
Like the whole pig story. You're like, I don't want pigs. He's like, they're on their way.
I know, and they're gross. And I still think they're gross.
They are gross.
Yeah. So there's that.
But I love bacon.
Me too. Me too.
So from diagnosis to the time where he left
passed.
our earth, yeah.
8.5 years. 8 years.
That long?
Yeah.
I knew it. Why did I even doubt that? He was a resilient man. He's like,
I know.
No, I need a few more years.
I
than
think
that."
a lot of
Yeah.
it, I think a lot of it was God had plans for him, you know, and I think that was a lot of it. I think his faith was strong and how strongly he believed. And then I think he himself had a positive attitude
Yeah.
towards life.
Yeah.
And he had a purpose, and if that's how he had to see his grandkids grow up in a chair, then he was willing to do it.
He wanted to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he never was the woe is me, and he was always I'm going to cross this bridge, and we're going to get to the other side, and then we're going to continue living life.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much kind of what we did through Tyler. And I'm not saying, I mean, I say this, and I don't mean it to come out as being flippant or anything. It wasn't easy at all. I'm not saying, but you have a choice
Yes, you
at
do.
the end of the day on how you're going to live your life. And are you going to, I could have easily chose to be in a fetal position in the back of my closet, because really that's where I was.
I did it a little bit.
Yeah.
I get it.
And so, you know.
Yeah.
And so, is that how you want to live your life? And I knew that's not what Tyler would want either. And how am I going to, you know, celebrate him still and keep his memory alive if I'm there? You know, and plus being in a I went into the dark hole for a very short period right after Tyler had passed. Like, I didn't care about anybody. I didn't care about that I had other kids. I didn't care that I had a grandson on the way, my first grandson. I didn't care about tennis or photography or all the things and the passions and the interests that I had in life. All of that just sort of went away. I didn't know how I was going to live in this world without him.
Yeah.
You know, like, how
Someone
am
turn
I
your
going
lights off.
to do that?
Yeah.
And I don't even want to. And it wasn't like I wasn't suicidal or anything like that. I just didn't care. Like, I went to this place that was so foreign to who I was as a human being.
Me too.
And who God made me to be. It was foreign, and it scared the daylights out of me. And I just remember God reaching in there and grabbing me out. I didn't stay in there for very long. And I'm not saying because he pulled me out that my grief stopped there. It didn't. Your grief, I still have grief. Like, I can go months now without crying. And then all of a sudden something will hit me, or I'll see something, or,
A song.
yeah. And I'll start crying,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that because that means I'm feeling. And
Well, you know what the saying is? Grief is with love with no place to go.
yeah,
And I always say that when trying to explain it to somebody, you don't quit loving that person.
no,
You're always going to love them. And you can't change that, whether it's Tyler or Tommy.
right.
That's just the way it is. My dad's been gone most of my life, and I still miss that person.
Yeah.
I miss that man bringing home candy and,
Yeah.
Whatever. There's not a whole lot I remember. I was only 9, but, or what kind of grandfather would he have been?
Yeah.
We know what Tommy was
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he got to do some of it.
Yes.
Not enough, but
Yes, it was cut short.
you could tell that
Yeah.
he loved those kids.
Oh my gosh, that he loved coaching, and he was a life liver.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a purpose, and he was very highly respected, and he wasn't super, like, we were the opposites sort of attract thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when he spoke, people paid attention.
Yeah.
And it was weird. We always said, like, I have to reel him out, and he has to reel me in. And so, it was good,
Yeah. Awesome.
It was good. So,
So,